What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and it's Top 10 Thursday. I think we can all agree that some stuff in modern gaming is absolutely epic. Games that are so groundbreaking and fun that you just don't want to put them down ever. There is a downside to this though, which is that there are also projects that seem to be released without even being finished. Titles that pretend to be full price and aren't even worth looking at. However, we have seen some developers that stick with it. They released a game that was kind of a dumpster fire and they ended up turning it into a masterpiece. This week, I want to give them credit for sticking by their games and making them into something worth talking about. These are my picks of the top 10 games launched broken that became good. Number 10. Street Fighter V. When it comes to crafting really tight brawlers that make you want to just sit down with an arcade stick in your hands for days at a time, it's hard to deny the fact that Capcom is one of the absolute greatest. But when it came to Street Fighter V, they actually faced some pretty big backlash because at launch it was very, very slimmed down. The story mode was just basically a series of pictures, the roster was quite tiny, and there wasn't even a typical arcade mode. However, they realized that they'd rushed this and ended up going back and releasing tons of free updates that turned this into a very revolutionized Street Fighter. And now it has a really big set of characters that everybody seems to love. Number 9. Rainbow Six Siege. It's quite rare to see a game that starts out being pretty openly hated, but over time manages to win over its fan base. But that's exactly what happened with Rainbow Six Siege. At release, it was quite confusing because, well, the rest of the Rainbow Six games are quite tactical, and, well, they have a story and stuff. But here, they decided to try and evolve the series and turn it more into a squad-based shooter, and it was online only. Despite the fact that it had really good balancing and tight maps, it still didn't manage to get people like me involved for quite a while, but they decided to really put the money into this project and expanded it until it became a giant game. Now, if you buy a starter pack of this, you're in for hundreds of hours of fun because every single match is going to be a completely unique experience and its own tiny story in itself. Number 8. Mafia III. I've always felt like there were two different classifications of glitches. There are ones that are funny and sort of improve the experience that a game like Skyrim may have, and then there's ones that sort of hold things back, that end up taking you out of the experience because you're too busy analyzing the fact that this world is quite broken overall. And unfortunately, the launch version of Mafia 3 had tons of the latter. It was so full of weird things like the sun would randomly just start spiraling around the earth so it would go from day to night and seconds instead of hours, or having it where you could just fall through the ground. Enemies would sometimes just run straight up into the forest instead of fighting back. This game had tons and tons of issues, but the developers realized that, acknowledged they made a mistake, and ended up immediately repairing it. This is one of those games that at release was kind of annoying and went on to become something that's definitely worth picking up. Number 7. Final Fantasy 15. This entry truly hurts my soul since I'm such a passionate Final Fantasy lover, but I can take a step back and acknowledge that 15 at release had some serious issues, mostly having to do with the plot. It seems like they were in such a rush to get this done on schedule that they overlooked certain plot holes. There were characters that would disappear occasionally for no reason, times where the game sort of just got a little bit too linear and didn't make sense, and, well, one of the biggest problems was the fact that you could only play as Noctis. Despite the fact that it was quite apparent that originally they intended for you to play as all the guys, you could only take control of one. Thankfully, they've gone back in and really corrected all of this to make it a lot more of a fleshed out experience, and it's really one of those games that started off being really, really cool and has grown on to be really magnificent. Number 6. No Man's Sky. If you were to hop into a time machine and go back to 2016 and look at a bunch of headlines about this game, they would almost certainly be all negative. People were so disappointed with this game originally because it had so many promises that were never delivered. Multiplayer, base building, being able to really expand and explore a nearly infinite universe. But the thing is, Sean Murray and his team decided not to abandon the project. Even though they probably made hundreds of millions of dollars off release and could have probably just left it behind to go live in the mountains, they decided to do the right thing and continue to release massive free updates. And at this point, it's actually pretty close to what they originally hoped it would be. Recently, I've gone back and put a bunch of extra hours into this game, and it's kind of shocking to see how much it's changed. It almost feels like a No Man's Sky, too. Number 5. Fortnite. Something I've always been fascinated by is the games that come out are slightly hated but then just forgotten. People play it at launch, put it down, and don't pick it up again for a couple months. And during that time, the developers end up working on the core mechanics to reinvent the entire experience, to make it something that's fun and worth your attention. And that's actually what they did with Fortnite Battle Royale, because originally this was a tiny zombie survival game that was not very well balanced. I actually played it at release and really didn't care for it. It was all about microtransactions and loot crates and purchasing additional weapons to survive the night. And now everybody seems to think of it as only the giant battle royale game because that's where they've made their billions. They turned a very flawed but well thought of project into a juggernaut franchise, something that is taking over the world. And it's funny to see the fact that now everybody pretends that they've always loved Fortnite. Number 4. Mass Effect 3. Now, before you start getting upset that I'm putting this on the list, I'm only adding it here because of the ending, which at the time was absolutely paltry. In general, Mass Effect as a trilogy is some of the best sci-fi ever made. It's got good combat, cool shooting. It's just one of those games that from start to finish makes a lot of sense. Except for one small element, which is the fact that the original ending was garbage, like to the point at which it confused fans. During the making of these games, one of the people actually involved with it said that this is a trilogy that would not have an A, B, or C conclusion, that all the different choices we're making throughout this franchise would actually end up meaning something, which is funny because at the very end there literally was an A, B, or C ending, which caused a huge uproar. Thankfully, the developers realized that this was a mistake and something that could be fixed and rather easily, so they decided to go in, re-record a bunch of audio, add in some extra choices, and make not only one extra ending, but make it where the entire conclusion had a really good fit to it. Now I've played through all of them again, and I see the fact that they definitely had a more complete vision for it, and we're finally getting a chance to see that. Number 3. Destiny. This is one of those titles that's brought up a lot because it's still very controversial. People don't know exactly what to think of it. But at release, we can all agree that the original version of Destiny was very much downright pathetic. It was very obvious that they had gone in and stripped about 95% of the story at the last minute. There were big chunks of the world that did nothing, where clearly cutscenes were supposed to take place. But here's where this tale actually gets good, which is that Bungie realized that they majorly screwed up, and they went in and released tons of free updates that put in tons of really cool content, and then came out with several massive expansions that completely reinvented the entire game, to the point in which I actually think the fact that Destiny 1 got so good is a big part of the reason that Destiny 2 has completely failed. People know that that game is a sequel that's going to be living in the first one's shadow. Number 2. SimCity. When it comes to describing a game as broken, I feel like there's no project that better fits that term than SimCity, since at launch, it literally did not function at all. The issue is that this was something that was built upon the idea of an always online system, even though it didn't need to be. Basically, whenever you wanted to play, you'd log into their servers and download your save file. They claimed that this was supposed to make it where other cities could communicate with each other, but really, everybody believed believes that this was just their way of trying to make sure that nobody could ever possibly pirate the game. Now, I'm sure that probably led to a couple extra sells, but it also led to tons of people requesting a refund because when the servers went down, the game was unplayable. You could not even get into it to take a peek at your city. This was such a stupid plan that caused the entire community to fall apart in a matter of weeks, and the studio itself ended up getting shut down. On the small bright side, before they all left and got other jobs, they introduced a free patch that corrected all these errors and made it where now this is actually a super fun game, and I wish that somehow, someway, we got a legit SimCity 2 with these people finally able to create what they wanted. Number 1. Halo: The Master Chief Collection. In 2013, when we were first getting the Xbox One, a lot of people were very hyped for it. But there was a little bit of a problem, which is that there was no Master Chief. People wanted to see this green hero drop out of the console and start shooting some aliens, but he was nowhere to be found. To try and stall until they could finish Halo 5, they ended up releasing this compilation of his earlier adventures. And personally, I thought it was quite cool to see all these games put together on one disc on one console. There was a little bit of an issue with the fact that this game did not really work. I mean, there were frame rate problems. The entire online crashed so often that people were basically making websites that told you if the game was going to be working. And the biggest thing was that they kept trying to roll out new stuff, like putting ODST in there and making it where other games were backwards compatible before they even finished this. We had corrupting save files. We had games that wouldn't even want to install. And the biggest problem was the fact that online progress was continuously getting wiped. I was super happy when I saw that they were going back and correcting a lot of this and really trying to repair the damage they had done. It's still not 100% complete, but now, 5 years later, at least it's pretty playable, and for that, I have to tip my hat and say that Halo is something you gotta pick up, and that's why I'm awarded this my pick as the game that went from the most broken to actually pretty dang fun. Did your favorite repaired game not make the list? Got an idea for a future top 10? Leave it in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. You guys seem to see everything in my background so quickly, so I just want to point it out. Yes, I managed to finally find an SNES Classic Edition, which is super cool, but I decided to double down and also get one of these retro indie controllers, so now I can actually play games on current consoles with an SNES controller, and also SNES games. So no matter what, I'm winning. Oh, hey! I was just playing a little bit of Grand Theft Auto on my Darth Vader PSP. Are you curious what I'm going to come out with next? Well, if you click this button, you'll be subscribed to be the first to know. Also, if you click over here and here, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. I promise, it was super good. Or it was really bad and I'm sure you can just make fun of me in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching.